Let me introduce myself. The name's Krell Zorba, chief historian of the Lumerian archives and, apparently, the only one around here who didn't think humans were just bedtime stories to scare juvenile spawn. Oh, how my colleagues laughed when I dedicated my life's work to studying mythical creatures. Well, who's laughing now? Not them, that's for sure. We Lumerians are a peaceful bunch. 6 limbs, bioluminescent skin, telepathic capabilities, the standard package for a species that evolved on a tidally locked planet orbiting a red dwarf star. We're scholars, diplomats, and traders. Violence? Not really our thing. Our exoskeletons might look impressive, but they're about as effective in combat as formal attire at a mud wrestling competition. For thousands of cycles, we've collected stories about the Terrans or humans, as they called themselves. Tales of bipedal beings with pathetically short lifespans who somehow managed to harness the power of their own aggression into something magnificent. Stories claim they once ruled half the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing. Most of my kind consider these tales to be nothing more than exaggerated folklore, like those ridiculous accounts of creatures who could alter reality by vibrating their nasal appendages. Humans are as real as quantum unicorns, my former professor used to say. A convenient boogeyman invented to explain the ancient ruins. If only he were still alive to eat those words, but with salt. Lots of salt. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need context. The current galactic situation is, well, let's call it suboptimal. The Valk Empire has been expanding aggressively for the past century, swallowing up smaller systems with their massive battle fleets. They're big, purple, and have more teeth than brain cells, never a good combination. My people have managed to maintain our independence through complicated trade agreements and by being generally useful to everyone. But our luck was running out. The Valk had set their sights on our resource-rich home system, and our famed diplomatic skills were proving about as effective as trying to reason with a black hole. That's when they came back. That's when the legends returned. It started with a blip. A tiny, insignificant anomaly at the edge of our long-range sensors that our monitoring station almost dismissed as background radiation. Almost. Thank the 7 moons for junior technician Plex Naro and her obsessive attention to detail, or as her supervisors called it, annoying perfectionism. This pattern repeats too precisely to be natural, she insisted, her luminescent patches flashing with excitement as she burst into my office, waving data chips like she'd discovered the secret to eternal life. Look at these frequencies. They're modulated, intentional. I humored her because, well, that's what we historians do when someone thinks they've found something historic. Usually it's just space junk, or the remnants of some long-dead civilization's attempt at immortalizing their existence. But these signals, these were different. They were active, recent, and coming from the void, that empty stretch of space where no sentient species had settled. The place where, according to legend, the humans had disappeared. The Council, predictably, responded with all the enthusiasm of a satiated Gorban slug. Dispatch a scientific vessel if you must, Historian Zorba, Grand Counselor Mila Taz sighed, her secondary eyes barely bothering to focus on me. But do try to keep expenses reasonable this time. Your last expedition to verify the so-called human battle arena turned out to be nothing more than an asteroid field with unusually geometric patterns. 3 days later, the research vessel Curious Intent reached the signal's origin. What they found sent ripples through our entire society. It's a gate of some kind, Captain Jinx Barada reported, her voice trembling despite her military training. A massive structure, at least 12 kilometers across. It's generating energy readings off our measurement scales. And Krell, there are symbols on it. They match the artifacts you've been collecting. Human writing. The images she transmitted showed a colossal ring of dark metal, suspended in space, pulsing with blue energy that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around it. And etched along its surface in letters I'd spent my lifetime studying, Terra Naval Command, Gateway Alpha. When I presented this evidence to the Council, the chamber erupted in chaos. Arguments broke out between those who accepted what we were seeing and those who clung desperately to disbelief. "Obviously a hoax," shouted Councillor Brex Tarvo, his voice cracking. "Some prankster with too much time and resources. A 12-kilometer structure. That's a rather elaborate prank," I countered. "Then it's Valk technology. They're trying to confuse us before they invade." Grand Councillor Mila leaned forward, her primary eyes narrowing. "And why would they label their secret weapon with human writing?" Brex had no answer for that. None of us did. And that's when the gate activated. 3 days after the gate activated, our entire defense grid went haywire. Proximity alarms blared across every major city on Lumeria Prime. The sky lit up with emergency beacons. Every communication channel flooded with panicked voices. Multiple unknown vessels have appeared in orbit. The defense minister's voice crackled over the emergency broadcast. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." I rushed to the Central Observatory, along with half the government. The sight that greeted us through the massive telescopic display was, well, terrifying doesn't quite capture it. It's weddingly apocalyptic comes closer. Hundreds of ships had materialized in perfect formation around our world. Not small vessels, mind you. Massive ones. The flagship alone was larger than our moon's orbital station. Sleek, angular designs with glowing blue propulsion systems that seemed to bend space itself. No visible weapons, which somehow made them more intimidating, not less. It's like seeing someone walk into a bar fight without armor. Either they're suicidal, or they're so dangerous they don't need protection. "How did they get past our early warning systems?" someone whispered. "They didn't," replied our Chief of Defense, Tark Lozano, his voice hollow. "They simply weren't there one moment, and then they were." The Lumerian council chamber transformed into a scene of absolute chaos. Some officials hid under tables. Others frantically tried contacting their families. But 3 council members actually knocked each other over rushing for the emergency exits. Grand Councillor Mila stood frozen, all 4 of her hands gripping the podium so tightly I could hear the material cracking. "They're hailing us," announced the communications officer, looking like she might faint. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on the main display. With trembling fingers, Mila authorized the connection. The image that appeared showed a creature that matched every description in my research. Bipedal, relatively hairless except for the top of its head. No exoskeleton, bioluminescence, or extra limbs. Just 2 arms, 2 legs, and a face with a single pair of forward-facing eyes. Completely unremarkable by galactic standards, except for the aura of absolute authority it projected. "I am Admiral Morgan Blackwood of the Terran Naval Fleet," the human said in perfect Lumerian, its voice deep and resonant. "We come in peace." I couldn't help myself. I laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that drew every eye in the chamber. "Sorry," I stammered. "It's just, that's exactly how the ancient texts said they would announce themselves." The human's face did something strange. The corners of its mouth curved upward. I would later learn this expression was called a smile. "You must be historian Krell Zorba," Admiral Blackwood said. "We've been monitoring your research with great interest." The fact that this creature knew my name nearly caused my cardiac systems to shut down. Our first official meeting took place in the Grand Council chamber. Security was tight enough to choke a gas giant, though what good our weapons would do against beings who could teleport entire battle fleets, nobody mentioned. Admiral Blackwood arrived with just 2 companions, a female human called Commander Diana Frost and a towering machine intelligence they introduced as Strategic Liaison Unit Tango. The humans wore blue and gold uniforms with symbols on their shoulders and chests. No visible weapons, but they moved with the casual confidence of predators who need no artificial advantages. "We apologize for the dramatic entrance," Blackwood said once we were seated, as casually as if discussing the weather. "But time is of the essence, and we needed to make an impression." On whom? Mila asked, finding her voice at last. Blackwood's expression hardened. Not on you, Grand Counselor. On the Valk Empire. Their battle fleet is 3 days from your system, and their intentions are not peaceful. You could have heard a microbe sneeze in the silence that followed Blackwood's announcement. 3 days. The Valk fleet was just 3 days away. Our intelligence had suggested we had at least 3 weeks. How could you possibly know that? Defense Minister Lozano finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Blackwood exchanged glances with Commander Frost before answering. We've been watching. For a very long time. Commander Frost activated a holographic display from a small device on her wrist. The entire Lumerian system appeared in miniature, along with the surrounding sectors. Tiny red dots, hundreds of them, blinked throughout the projection. These are our observation platforms, she explained. Quantum-linked, phase-shifted out of normal space-time, undetectable by current galactic technology. You've been spying on us? Counselor Breck sputtered, his luminescence patterns flashing anger. We've been monitoring galactic development, Blackwood corrected, completely unfazed. After the collapse wars, humanity decided to step back, observe rather than interfere. Until now. Why now? I asked. Blackwood's eyes, startlingly blue, locked with mine. Because the Valk have crossed a line. Their new planetary cleansing protocol has destroyed 3 civilizations in the past year alone. Billions of sentient beings erased. The Admiral stood, somehow seeming taller than before. We've already sent a message to Supreme Commander Gorax of the Valk Empire. The terms are simple: immediate withdrawal from Lumerian space, reparations to the worlds they've harmed, and complete demilitarization of their fleet. The Council erupted in nervous laughter. Even I, with all my research on human capabilities, found myself grinning at the absurdity. Admiral. Grand Counselor Mila said gently, as if explaining something to a child. The Valk command a fleet of over 2,000 warships. They've conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. Their Supreme Commander literally wears a cape made from the preserved skin of diplomats who failed to appease him. And your fleet, impressive as it is, added Minister Lozano, numbers what? 200 vessels. Blackwood's face remained impassive. 112, actually. You're outnumbered nearly 20 to 1, Brex exclaimed. The corner of Blackwood's mouth twitched upward. Yes, poor bastards. Commander Frost coughed in what sounded suspiciously like a disguised laugh. Supreme Commander Gorax has 6 hours to respond, Blackwood continued. After that, we take action. As the humans left the chamber, I overheard Minister Lozano murmuring to Mila, they're completely delusional. The Valk will obliterate them. Looking back, I almost feel sorry for how utterly wrong we all were. The 6-hour deadline came and went. The Valk response. A single transmission consisting of Supreme Commander Gorax's unmistakable gravelly laughter followed by 3 words, we accept war. Subtle diplomacy was never the Valk's strong suit. Our long-range sensors detected the Valk battle fleet changing course, accelerating toward Lumerian space. They'd arrive in just under 30 hours, now apparently they'd installed new drive systems since our last intelligence report. How thoughtful of them to hurry to their own destruction. Wait, did I just think that? Even then, some part of me must have believed the human legends. The rest of me was busy preparing emergency evacuation protocols for our most important historical archives. Let's call it strategic optimism with a backup plan. The Lumerian Council declared a state of emergency. Citizens were urged to remain in their homes. Defense systems were brought to full alert for all the good our pitiful weapons would do against the Valk planet cracker bombs. The humans, meanwhile, seemed bizarrely relaxed. Admiral Blackwood requested permission to broadcast tactical communications throughout our government channels for transparency. Mila agreed, probably hoping to gather intelligence on human battle strategies. What followed was the most surreal 24 hours in recorded Lumerian history. Instead of frantic preparations, we watched humans engage in recreational activities. Some played card games, others watched entertainment programs. A group on the flagship organized what they called a barbecue, which apparently involved ritually burning food before consuming it. When the Valk fleet was just 6 hours out, Admiral Blackwood was observed taking a power nap. Are all humans this nonchalant about impending annihilation? I asked Commander Frost during a brief communication. She smiled that disturbing human smile. Only when the outcome isn't in doubt. The Valk fleet arrived with their typical dramatic flair, dropping out of hyperspace in attack formation, a massive wall of warships stretching across our entire system. Their flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, led the charge, a monstrosity bristling with enough firepower to reduce our planet to molten slag. Supreme Commander Gorax's ugly face appeared on all communication channels. Like all Valk, he had purple-scaled skin, 4 yellow eyes, and entirely too many teeth. Humans, he snarled, your legends claimed you were mighty warriors. Yet you send a pitiful 100 ships against the might of the Valk Empire. I will mount your admiral's head beside my lavatory as a reminder of your foolishness. Charming fellow. Admiral Blackwood's response was broadcast on the same channel, his voice calm and almost bored. This is your final warning, Commander Gorax. Power down your weapons and withdraw. The Valk fleet launched their first salvo, thousands of antimatter torpedoes streaking toward the human ships. Everyone in the council chamber held their breath. I may have whimpered slightly. No judgment, please. What happened next defies explanation, but I'll try anyway. About halfway to their targets, every single torpedo just disappeared, vanished, as if they'd never existed. There was a moment of stunned silence from both sides. Then Admiral Blackwood's voice again. Tactical Officer Lewis, you may proceed with Phase 1. A human voice responded cheerfully. Yes, sir. Deploying gravity lances now. In beams of silver light shot out from just 12 of the human vessels. Where they touched Valk ships, and I absolutely promise I'm not exaggerating here, the mighty warships simply folded in on themselves, compressing into dense, twisted chunks of metal no larger than personal transport pods. 87 Valk capital ships, gone in seconds. Supreme Commander Gorax began screaming orders. The Valk fleet regrouped, launching their infamous Dark Swarm, hundreds of thousands of automated attack drones designed to overwhelm defensive systems. Commander Frost, Blackwood's calm voice continued, initiate quantum field disruption. With pleasure, sir. The human ships emitted a pulse of blue energy that rippled through space. Every single Valk drone froze in place, then began flying in random directions, some even attacking Valk ships. Absolute chaos erupted in the enemy fleet. Did they just hijack the entire drone network? Defense Minister Lozano gasped. Impossible, whispered our chief technologist. The processing power required would be. Phase 2, Lieutenant Patel, Blackwood continued, as if conducting a routine training exercise. Initiating Phase 2. Dimensional anchors deployed. The remaining Valk fleet suddenly stopped moving. Not slowed down, stopped completely, frozen in space. Supreme Commander Gorax's transmission showed him frantically working his control panels. What is this sorcery? Our engines are at full power, but we cannot move. Dimensional anchors, explained Blackwood conversationally, as if discussing the weather. They locally alter the properties of space-time. You're trying to move forward in time, but that particular section of space disagrees with you. I'd explain the quantum mechanics, but frankly, I doubt you'd understand. In just 15 minutes, the mighty Valk Armada terror of 17 star systems had been reduced to floating debris and immobilized hulks, without the humans firing a single conventional weapon. Admiral, Gorax growled, actual fear now visible in his yellow eyes. What are your terms? Blackwood's reply was chilling in its simplicity, the same as they were 6 hours ago. Except now we're adding complete replacement of the Valk military command structure. Starting with you. The next transmission from the inevitable conquest showed a different Valk officer. Supreme Commander Gorax was nowhere to be seen. No one asked what happened to him. No one wanted to know. The Valk Empire accepts all terms, the new commander said, his voice shaking. As the remnants of the once mighty fleet limped away, I found my voice at last. That wasn't a battle, I said to no one in particular. That was pest control. And the humans weren't even breathing hard. In the aftermath of what historians would later call the 15-minute war, our entire civilization experienced what humans aptly term an existential crisis. Everything we thought we knew about galactic power structures had been upended in less time than it takes to prepare a decent cup of flavored mineral water. 2 days after the battle, Admiral Blackwood addressed the full Lumerian Council. The chamber was packed. Every official, diplomat, and high-ranking citizen had called in favors to attend. I was granted a front-row seat, not because of my status, but because the humans specifically requested my presence. My colleagues, who had previously mocked my human obsession, were suddenly very interested in becoming my close personal friends. Funny how that works. The Terran Commonwealth offers the Lumerian Confederation a formal alliance, Blackwood announced without preamble. We will provide military protection, technological exchange, and economic partnership. In return, we ask for cultural sharing, diplomatic support in re-establishing our presence in galactic affairs, and access to your historical archives, particularly those curated by historian Zorba. The council didn't even debate. The vote was unanimous, possibly the first time in Lumerian history that our notoriously argumentative governing body agreed on anything more significant than the cafeteria menu. What followed was the most fascinating period of my professional life. Human specialists arrived by the dozens, establishing a permanent embassy in our capital. Cultural exchange programs began immediately. And I became something of a celebrity, appointed as official liaison between our species. Let me tell you, humans are weird. Fascinatingly, delightfully weird. For starters, they're obsessed with exchanging pieces of paper when they meet. Business cards, they call them. Commander Frost gave me one with her information, and I made the mistake of eating it, as is customary in Lumerian culture, to show you're absorbing someone's identity into your own. The look on her face. I learned later they just keep them in little cases for reference. How inefficient. Then there's their baffling relationship with their defensive capabilities. These beings who can fold battleships like origami and freeze time itself walk around seemingly defenseless, wearing no armor or exoskeletons. When Ambassador Julian Parker cut his finger on a data pad, I nearly fainted at the sight of his red bodily fluid leaking out. He just laughed. It's just a paper cut, Krell, he said, applying a small adhesive patch. But your internal fluids are escaping, I exclaimed. We've got about 5 liters of blood, he explained patiently. I can lose quite a bit before it's a problem. Their relationship with danger is equally perplexing. These same creatures who casually dismantled the most feared military force in the galaxy have recreational activities specifically designed to experience fear. They call it thrill-seeking. Ambassador Parker invited me to watch something called a horror movie, where humans intentionally expose themselves to frightening stimuli for entertainment. My bioluminescence didn't stop flashing emergency patterns for 3 days. Perhaps most confusing is their obsession with consuming plants and animals for nutrition. They have perfectly good synthetic protein options, but insist on the real thing. At a diplomatic dinner, I watched in horror as Admiral Blackwood consumed the muscle tissue of no fewer than 3 different species, all while discussing opera. As if devouring dead flesh while appreciating melodic sound patterns was perfectly normal behavior. When I expressed my shock to Dr. Olivia Tanaka, the human cultural attack, she just chuckled. If you think that's weird, wait until you learn about our mating rituals. I decided some mysteries of human behavior were better left unexplored. Despite their peculiarities, it became increasingly clear why humans had once dominated the galaxy. Their technological prowess was matched only by their adaptability. Within weeks, they were speaking our language fluently, navigating our complex social hierarchies, and even adapting their environments to accommodate our biological needs. When Ambassador Parker showed up at a formal function with luminescent body paint that approximated Lumerian emotional patterns, the entire assembly was moved to the reverential humming that marks our deepest respect. We may not understand each other perfectly, Blackwood told me during a private meeting, but we don't need to. We just need to respect our differences and build on our similarities. For a species that could conquer the galaxy in a week if they chose, this emphasis on mutual respect was perhaps the most surprising and reassuring discovery of all. 6 months into our alliance with humanity, Grand Counselor Mila organized what humans call a summit. Representatives from 12 species gathered on Lumeria Prime to formally recognize the return of humanity to galactic affairs. The Valk sent a delegation too, though they kept to themselves, jumping at shadows and flinching whenever a human came near. Can't say I blamed them. After the formal proceedings, Admiral Blackwood invited key representatives to the human flagship, the Inevitable Dawn. I was included, naturally. Being the galaxy's foremost human expert has its perks. The ship was, well, impossible. From the outside, it appeared to be roughly 4 kilometers in length. Inside, it seemed to contain spaces that couldn't possibly fit within its external dimensions. When I mentioned this to Commander Frost, she winked and said, "Spatial compression." The inside is technically in a different dimensional fold than the outside. She said this as casually as one might comment on the weather. We gathered in what they called the observation lounge, a room with transparent walls offering a view of space so perfect it felt like floating among the stars. Admiral Blackwood, now dressed in a formal uniform adorned with symbols I would later learn represented humanity's ancient nations, addressed us. "You've all been wondering why humanity vanished from galactic affairs 3,000 years ago," he began, his voice solemn. "Tonight, you'll learn the truth." He nodded to a technician, and the stars outside changed. No longer were we looking at the familiar constellations of Lumerian space. These stars were arranged differently, moved in patterns that made my inner ears twitch with disorientation. "What you're seeing is a real-time view of Andromeda Galaxy," Blackwood explained. 2.5 million light-years from here. The assembled delegates gasped. FTL communication was common enough, but instantaneous visual connection across intergalactic distances? Impossible. 3,000 years ago. Blackwood continued. Humanity faced a choice. We had developed technologies that were advancing faster than our ethical frameworks could adapt. Dimensional manipulation, consciousness transfer, artificial intelligence beyond anything you can imagine. The power to destroy stars with the press of a button. He paused, his expression grim. We were on the verge of becoming exactly what your legends described godlike beings with the temperament of children. And then came the Ascension crisis. The room darkened, and a holographic display showed a star system with 9 planets. Earth, humanity's homeworld, was highlighted. A faction of humans attempted to forcibly evolve our entire species using a technology called the Ascension Matrix. They believed they were saving us. Instead, they nearly triggered our extinction. The hologram showed massive energy waves emanating from Earth, engulfing the entire system. The resulting conflict lasted 10 days and claimed 2 billion lives. When it was over, we made a decision that would change our destiny. We activated the Great Withdrawal. Another hologram showed thousands of massive ships, far larger than even the Inevitable Dawn, gathering above Earth. We took 90% of our population and most of our technology and simply left. We established colonies in 13 galaxies, leaving behind only observation outposts here in the Milky Way. We needed time to develop the wisdom to match our power. Ambassador Julian Parker stepped forward. The legends you have of humans as conquerors, warriors, or gods, they're all fragments of truth. But they're based on who we were, not who we've become. Dr. Tanaka joined them. We decided to return now because the galaxy has reached a critical juncture. Species like the Valk are developing technologies similar to those that nearly destroyed us. We couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself. Counselor Mila found her voice first. Are you saying that humans now inhabit multiple galaxies? Blackwood nodded. The Terran Commonwealth spans 17 galaxies now, actually. What you've seen of our technology is just the tip of the iceberg. The gravity lances? The dimensional anchors? I asked. Technology we developed 300 years ago, Parker said with a slight smile. Practically obsolete by our current standards. Then why not show your true capabilities? Asked the Zentabi ambassador, her antennae twitching with suspicion. Blackwood's expression softened. Because the last time we showed the full extent of our power, it terrified everyone, including ourselves. We're trying a different approach this time, partnership rather than domination. As if to emphasize his point, the view outside shifted again, showing a massive structure orbiting a distant star. This is a Dyson swarm we built around a star in Andromeda. It powers our intergalactic network. We could build one here within a year, providing enough energy for every species in this sector to live in abundance. I stared at the structure, my historian's mind racing to comprehend the implications. The legends were wrong about one crucial thing, Blackwood concluded. We never saw ourselves as gods or conquerors. We were just explorers who developed tools we weren't ready for. Now we're back, not to rule, but to help ensure no one makes the same mistakes we did. Later that night, as I recorded my observations, I realized that the most terrifying thing about humans wasn't their technology. It was their restraint. The ripple effects of humanity's return spread through the galaxy faster than a quantum entanglement wave. Within one standard year, everything had changed. And I mean everything. The Valk Empire, once the terror of the quadrant, transformed into the galaxy's most enthusiastic peace advocates. Nothing like a 15-minute military collapse to inspire a cultural reassessment, I suppose. Their new government even renamed their capital from Conquest Plaza to Harmony Haven. A bit on the nose, if you ask me, but certainly an improvement. Trade routes that had been too dangerous to travel for centuries suddenly became safe as human peacekeeping vessels established what they called protected transit corridors. Piracy dropped by 94% in 6 months. The remaining 6% consisted entirely of idiots who hadn't yet grasped that human sensors could detect a spacecraft's engine ignition from 12 light-years away. Technology transfer programs began under careful human supervision. They didn't give us everything. Of course, apparently there's a detailed protocol called the Development Index that determines which technologies are appropriate for which civilizations. When I complained about this to Commander Frost, she just smiled that infuriating human smile. Would you give a nuclear warhead to a toddler? She asked. Of course not, I replied. Same principle. Hard to argue with that logic, especially when the toddler in this metaphor is your entire civilization. Even so, the technologies they did share transformed our lives. Medical advances eliminated diseases that had plagued us for generations. Energy production systems rendered fuel scarcity obsolete. Agricultural enhancements ended food shortages across 17 worlds. The humans established a new galactic governance body called the Stellar Concord, with representatives from every spacefaring species. They took only one seat for themselves, despite possessing enough power to rule by decree if they wished. When I asked Admiral Blackwood about this apparent contradiction, his response was surprisingly candid. Power isn't about controlling others, Krell. It's about having choices. We choose cooperation because we've seen where domination leads. 3,000 years ago, we were conquerors. We've spent millennia learning a better way. As the official Lumerian ambassador to the Stellar Concord, yes, I got a promotion. Turns out being obsessed with mythical humans wasn't career suicide after all. I've had a front row seat to this galactic transformation. Ancient enemies now trade peacefully. Species that once couldn't share a star system without war now collaborate on scientific research. The Zentabai and Plorks, who had been locked in a blood feud for 7 centuries, recently opened embassies on each other's homeworlds. All because humanity decided to come back. Is it perfect? Of course not. There are still conflicts, inequalities, and tensions. Some species resent human influence, viewing them as self-appointed galactic babysitters. Others have developed something close to religious worship of humans, which the humans themselves find deeply uncomfortable. Balance is a process, not a destination. As for my people, we've become something of humanity's favorite students, perhaps, because I spent decades collecting their artifacts, while everyone else dismissed them as myths. Grand Counselor Mila jokes that Lumerians are now the galaxy's human experts, sought out by other species trying to understand these strange bipeds who can fold space and build stars. The irony isn't lost on me. For my entire career, I wished for validation of my human research. I dreamed of discovering proof that these legendary beings had actually existed. Now they're having lunch in our cafeterias, establishing outposts on our moons, and completely reorganizing galactic civilization. Be careful what you wish for. Indeed. I got my proof, and with it came the humbling realization that everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos was hilariously, catastrophically wrong. The most technologically advanced species in the galaxy isn't the one with the biggest warships or the most planets. It's the one wise enough to know when not to use its power. It's been 10 years since the day the legends returned. 10 years since a small fleet of human ships rewrote the rules of galactic politics in 15 minutes. 10 years since I went from that eccentric historian obsessed with myths to the galaxy's foremost human expert. Life takes peculiar turns, doesn't it? I'm recording this final entry from my new office aboard the Stellar Concord headquarters, a massive space station at the Galactic Core that serves as our United Government's central hub. My official title is Senior Cultural Liaison and Historical Advisor, which basically means I spend my days explaining humans to aliens and aliens to humans. Less glamorous than it sounds, trust me. Yesterday I had to explain to a human diplomat why gifting perfume to a Zentabai is tantamount to suggesting they smell like fermented waste. And then explain to the Zentabi why this wasn't a calculated insult, but an innocent mistake based on humans' bizarrely underdeveloped olfactory senses. The galaxy has settled into a new normal. Human technology has lifted countless worlds from poverty and scarcity. The protected transit corridors now span every major system. The Valk, once feared conquerors, have become respected artisans, their warships converted into traveling exhibitions of their surprisingly beautiful crystalline sculptures. Who knew those purple thugs had such artistic souls? Humanity continues to surprise us. Despite possessing technology that could subjugate the entire galaxy, they remain committed to partnership. They've established thousands of cultural exchange programs, scientific collaborations, and educational initiatives. Their patience with species that must seem painfully primitive to them is nothing short of remarkable. That's not to say there haven't been incidents. Last month, during the first intergalactic sports competition, a human athlete named Marcus Wong accidentally set a new galactic record in the gravitational resistance challenge. The machine, designed to steadily increase simulated gravity until competitors could no longer remain standing, malfunctioned when Wong refused to fall, even as the settings reached 5 times the intended maximum. Turns out humans evolved on a planet with substantially higher gravity than most species, something they had neglected to mention. We didn't want to make anyone feel bad, Admiral Blackwood explained with that characteristic human shrug. Or there was the diplomatic reception where Ambassador Parker absent-mindedly consumed a decorative display of toxic berries that would have killed any other species. He claimed they tasted a bit like spicy blueberries and asked for the recipe. My favorite incident, however, occurred during the signing of the Proxima Accords last year. The human delegation included an emotional support animal called a dog, a four-legged companion species with fur and entirely too much enthusiasm. When released from its restraint, this creature proceeded to lick the face of the Tsani Emperor, whose species considers facial contact a deeply intimate act typically reserved for life mates. There was a moment of shocked silence before the Emperor, a ruler feared across 3 sectors for his stoic ruthlessness, giggled like a juvenile and asked, "Can I have one?" Now there's a breeding program for space dogs on the Tsani homeworld. The waiting list is 18 months long. So here we are, a galaxy transformed by the return of a species that most thought was mythical. The legends were right about their power but wrong about their nature. They're not the conquering gods of our ancient stories. They're explorers, scientists, diplomats, and yes, warriors when necessary, but mostly they're just people trying to do better than they did before. As I finish this historical account, a human phrase seems particularly apt: truth is stranger than fiction. I couldn't have made this up if I tried.